controller's engines liked to look clean, bright and shiny. They loved being washed down and having their brass polished until it gleams. James was in the workshop being repainted. He was beside himself with joy.
Not surprised about that. James is another tenderhead who's into himself more than anyone else. Just like Pompous Gordon. I'm actually surprised we are starting off an episode with getting a brand new coat of paint. Typically, this is something stated at the end of an episode, unlike James, who had to go telling everyone when he was done.
"Aren't I a beautiful red?" he asked the others. "No wonder the fat controller thinks I'm special." But Percy was worried. He wasn't being repainted, and he wasn't red.
Don't worry too much about that, Percy. You should know by now James is always about himself. And Thomas made a good point anyway. He said looking splendid and being really useful were two independent things. But of course, Thomas's words of wisdom fell on deaf funnels.
Before Thomas could say anything else, James closed his eyes and fell happily asleep. The next morning, all the engines were very busy. Percy was working at the coal plant.
That figures. James not listening to anyone's advice or suggestions. Being that us, the audience, have experienced many backfires in this show, let's prepare for one, shall we? So my guess is James is going to be paired up with some dirty job he won't want to do, because it'll ruin his paint job. I'm thinking that's what it'll be.
The fat controller came to see James. "The coal trucks must reach Brendam docks before the boat sails, so no dilly-dallying," he said. "Yes, sir," said James, and he set off at once.
Well, I'm happy to be proven wrong on James's response. I thought he would complain that he had to handle dirty freight again. But no, he just openly okayed the big man and went on. By the way, did anyone notice Top Hat's figurine moved after James passed him? That's new to me, and cool. But what wasn't cool was that James dawdled on his way to the coal plant.
Percy was working as hard as he could, but he was falling behind. The line of trucks was getting longer and longer, and the yard manager was getting crosser and crosser. Where could James be?
Taking his sweet old time, that's for sure. Fans should enjoy what they just heard, though, in the last two clips. Hearing James's new theme again, along with the transition of Percy's theme, as he struggles to keep up with his work, fit well. Meanwhile, James was still moving at a snail's pace to get where he needed to be. Shaking my head right now.
James saw Thomas. "Look at me," he puffed. "Don't I look fine?" "You should be at work," called Thomas. But James didn't listen to Thomas. James was enjoying being James.
Ha! That was a great piece of dialogue right there. Thomas laying the smackdown on James for once, for the right reason, is great. Because that's what he should really be doing. But no, James was doing exactly what Top Hat said for him not to do. I hope he feels some kind of regret when he sees just how much Percy's been busting his buffers.
Poor Percy was almost worn out. "What will happen to the order now?" cried the yard manager. When James rolled into the coal mines, it was late in the afternoon. Percy was cross.
Nope. Doesn't seem like James regrets what he did at all by that face mask. And I bet Percy's cross. Thankfully, the yard manager decided to be just as much a pain to James as James was to him, by giving him practically all the trucks that Percy put together. Poop, poop, poop. Serves him right. And amazingly, as mad as Percy was, he still told James the trucks were up to their usual tricks. And it again fell on deaf funnels.
But the trucks were naughtier than ever. They rocked and rolled and crashed and bashed. James's face was soon covered in soot. Going downhill, the trucks wiggled and giggled.
Well, Percy warned him. And oh well, how about that coat of paint you got there, James? I don't see it now. And wow, did you hear the new troublesome truck laughter? They literally sound like little kids now. Instead of high-pitched gerbils, I just had 20 cans of Red Bull. I don't know which is preferred. But we all know what James preferred. None of it.
He kept passing his friends. He passed Emily and Edward and Thomas. Thomas thought the only red thing left on James was his face.
Sorry, can't help you there, Jamesy boy. This is your own undoing here. I'm a little confused, though, about the troublesome trucks. As fans have probably noticed, the trucks' faces have swapped on both sides every time the camera faces either side of James's train. What, do these trucks have faces on each side? No, that would be stupid. Just keep it on one side. Please. Anyway, James finally made it to Brendam Docks, but was no longer his smug self.
He didn't feel splendid anymore, but for the first time all day, James could hear clearly. He could hear the sound of the trucks giggling at him. And despite feeling foolish, even James had to smile.
All right, well, that's one consolation. Not to mention the fact that James got away with his bullcrapping, scot-free from not only Percy, but Top Hat, too. This was a fun episode, mainly because it changed the story slightly to make it feel fresh. James, who's usually opposed to getting dirty any time of the day, didn't mind it at all when he started and didn't mind at the end, which is unheard of for him. At least he didn't care at the end because he got the job done. On time, surprisingly, and gave Percy a laugh, too. Not to mention, I'm sure those troublesome trucks were having a ball the whole time. And for their laughs, again, I'm not sure which is better. Of course, the classic truck laughs are great, but these are uniquely interesting, too. Then there were the incidents where James runs by all his friends, either being covered in soot or trying to show off and being told off like Thomas did. That was well needed for him, even though he didn't listen. But the lesson of learning from what others say is important to remember. For music, this episode utilized both James's theme while he puffed along the line, and Percy's while he tried working on his own. Both suited the scenes well and were done nicely. The visuals were also pleasing. The shots where the camera swoops in, either to zoom in or out, on the engine or scenery is a real eye-catcher. If anything, the only issue with the camera work was when the trucks were having their faces looking at the camera every time James passed. Really, if the trucks were initially facing James, then keep them facing James. Don't put their faces on the other side if the camera looks at him from another angle. It's confusing. I also haven't had the chance to say this yet, but it's really nice to see how the figurines have been scaled up to have more detail on them. The locations were good too. Viewers get to see the 3-tier bridge, making its first appearance in the new series, Tidmouth Sheds, and the coaling plant where Percy works. There was also one new place, and that was the Hoe and Croca Canal, where James admires himself in the water's reflection, with a steady tracking shot. Next episode is Thomas Saves the Day. Thanks for watching.